Hi, welcome to Storytime with Dave Book. I appreciate you being here. I'm going to turn the lights down just a touch because it's awful bright. Hold on 1 second. Such high tech stuff. Okay, we're going to start the next chapter of Sheriff in a Small Town 3. So, appreciate you being here. Looking forward to getting this done. By the time this is done, I should have um, Soul Man number 2 done. So we'll have something to slide right into. So I'll read slow. This one is past and present. Rocky and Agnes were still on vacation, just taking the time off at home now since they came back early for the demonstration. For the time being, they were living in the snow house and enjoying the relative peace and quiet. Relative because it was noisy in the field the school was using. Besides growing vegetables on each child's 1 acre plot, some 4-H teams had asked to use some land as part of their projects. This meant that besides the vegetables, there were 6 goats, 4 sheep, 18 chickens, 2 peacocks, and 5 very large pigs, and 1 cow. Chickens were all white leghorns and were good layers. The students usually rode up on their bikes and took care of their livestock before school. If Agnes was up, she sometimes had a couple of eggs left outside in a basket for their breakfast. Rocky installed a milking area in one of the buildings that was used by the goats and cow. The choke box was handy to hold the milk until the parents or someone could pick it up. Most of the farm was well away from the house, so the noise was minimal except for when the school bus arrived. Then it became noisy and filled with the sound of laughter as the children worked together and visited the animals while taking a break. Rocky had set up folding chairs so Mrs. Poletti could hold classes on the next stage of development. He was unfolding them and setting up the whiteboard when he heard the loud exhaust of the school bus parked nearby. Picking up his speed, he was placing the last of the chairs when the door burst open and a large group of children entered. Agnes followed behind with a platter of cookies and a pitcher of chocolate milk on a tray. Rocky grabbed the cookie as he escorted Agnes out, taking Mary from her arms as they walked to the door. Suddenly they were surrounded as the children all wanted to see the baby. Mrs. Poletti had a hard time restoring order. Rocky used his sheriff's voice to have the way cleared so they could go home. It had the desired effect as the way was cleared and children scurried to their desks, grabbing a cookie on the way. As they walked to the house, they could hear Mrs. Poletti beginning the lesson. Rocky sat in the kitchen, holding Mary and rocking her gently. Agnes was fixing lunch and looking out the window, watching all the students working on their plots. A young girl, about, 15, came running up to the house, her face urgent. Her frantic run and desperate look on her face told Agnes all she needed to know. She opened the door, she approached and pointed the way to the bathroom. All Rocky saw was Agnes leap to the door and swiftly moving blur as someone darted into the bathroom. On the floor were muddy tracks. Rocky put Mary in the crib and pulled out the broom and dustpan. He'd finished sweeping up the larger bits when Agnes put her bucket of hot soapy water down. When the girl came out of the bathroom, the sight of Rocky on hands and knees cleaning up her mess almost made her break down into tears. She asked for a rag and after wringing it out, cleaned the floor in the bathroom. She came out red-faced and apologized for the mess, then went back to rejoin her class. Rocky went out to the porch and dumped the water over the side into the flower bed. Coming back in, he helped Agnes finish peeling the potatoes. Rocky looked out the window and saw a boy run to the bushes near the plot and come back smiling. I'll have to dig an outhouse or something. We can't have kids diving into the bushes to relieve themselves. Agnes rinsed off another potato. Well, only the boys do that. The young ladies come inside and make a mess for you to clean up. Agnes shook her head. They usually take off their boots, but that was an emergency. Well, an outhouse is good for emergencies, but maybe we can put in a bathroom outside the class area. lighted and ventilated too. Rocky considered the cost of putting in a bathroom and shrugged. In for a penny, in for a pound, as they say. That's the problem with starting something like this. One thing leads to another, and pretty soon you find as if you're in over your head. When lunch is over, let's pick a couple of bushels of apples for apple butter. Agnes looked at him eagerly and began to cut onions swiftly. Apple butter was a favorite for both of them. Hold on one second. In the courthouse, things were quiet. Michaela had brought lunch, and Larry was sleeping in the side drawer of the desk in a blanket with a rolled-up T-shirt up for a pillow. As they ate, they played rummy to pass the time. A beep from the fax machine let them know new information was arriving. "Incoming!" Joe yelled and leapt to get the notice. He read it and passed it over to Talbot. Talbot read it and his face hardened. Joe hadn't seen anything in particular on the page, just a notice that 2 people had been released from jail. One had been the manager of the co-op and the other was his brother. It was, it was the brother's name that brought the flame to Talbot's eye. This was a man who had molested his wife and now he could be back in town. Fortunately, plenty of the women in town had been attending the self-defense classes that Rocky and he had begun. And continued. Michaela had been instrumental in getting them started when she had to take the law into her own hand to protect herself from the co-op manager's brother. Talbot slowly rose and forced himself to stay calm. "I'll be back in a couple of minutes." Michaela took the fax and read it, and her face turned red. "Oh, damn. He's back and there isn't anything anyone can do." Joe asked for and received a scaled-down version of what happened. He sat deep in thought, then reached over for the law book and Ohio laws. Talbot and having Joe read through them in slow times to familiarize himself with some of the lesser-known laws. Joe had seen one that was seldom used but could be very useful right now. He was still thumbing through the pages when Talbot returned. "I just talked to Mary at the co-op. She says Paul called up and wanted to pick up where he left off. She had to vacate the office, but he's given her the running of the store still. She's really turned the place around, so he has nothing to lose with her staying in charge. Really want to know if Paul's brother was back too." Paul just shrugged. He says his brother hasn't contacted him and wouldn't matter if he had. They both had done their time. He says I have to leave them alone. Yes, he's right. But I still would like to know where his brother is. Talbot almost jumped out of his seat when Joe yelled excitedly, "Got it!" He spun the book around to face Talbot. Talbot read what was in front of him and slapped the desk so hard he woke little Larry. "Great work, Joe," he exclaimed as he picked up Larry and handed him to Michaela. She took him in back and fed him. Talbot was reading and rereading the statute from 1963, Ohio. Ohio was one of the first, if not the first state to have a sexual predator registration. The fact that it was rarely put to use was no matter. The law was on the books and could be used. Talbot's face flushed. "Well, we got him. If he shows up in town, we got him. Him and his damn brother. We'll nail them both." Joe was shocked and upset. He spoke quietly, trying to get his friend to see reason. Lawrence, the use of his given name, brought Talbot up short. Hardly anyone called Lawrence, not even Michaela. But using it worked. Joe had Talbot's complete attention. "We can't use the law to exact revenge. I know what this unprintable guy did, and you have every right to feel the way you do, but we of all people have to do things within the law. If we find him, well, he's got to report where he's staying. We can keep an eye on him, but we can't harass him. If he tries anything with anyone, we can move on him then, but we can't try and force his hand, much as I want to, since I wouldn't want any woman, family, friend, or acquaintance to be hurt by this unprintable guy. We have to do it legally." Talbot knew Joe was right. He turned his hand through his hair and lit a cigarette. He didn't smoke often, but he needed to calm down. Okay, Joe, you're right. Let's go over and talk to Paul. We let him know his brothers must report himself once he knows about the law. If he tries to hide him, it's aiding and abetting. Fair? Joe rose and put his hand on his jacket. Well, fair enough. Talbot locked away his gun, letting Joe retain his. Talbot was still seething inside and didn't trust himself to go armed. Knocking on Paul's door, they waited. When Paul opened the door, Joe had his foot in so that the door remained open. Paul was mad at the interruption. I told you, I paid my dues, and you gotta leave me alone. I'll call the state if you barge in here once more. Joe took the lead. Paul, we have information that you need to know about. It's in your and your brother's best interest that you hear me out. Grudgingly, Paul opened the door and offered them seats. Joe sat, and Talbot stood behind him and tried to look relaxed. Paul, you know that your brother is now considered a sexual predator, Paul snorted. Yeah, but like I said, he did his time. We both did. Even got out early for good behavior, so what's that got to do with me? Joe remained patient, his voice casual and persuasive. Well, it has a lot to do with you if you were protecting him. Ohio is one of the only states with a sexual predator registry. It means that your brother is required by law to let us know where he's living once he's in town. We won't broadcast it. We won't even let everyone know he's on the list. This is a state law and something we have to do. I want you to understand where he stands and where you stand. Now we have given you the information, we'll leave. We're just trying to protect you. Your brother has now become a hazard to you, and we thought you should be aware of it. Thank you for giving us your attention, and we'll show ourselves out. Without another word, the two lawmen left. As the door closed, they heard Paul banging angrily on his desk. Talbot patted Joe on the shoulder. Yeah, that's perfect. Better than I would have. Joe, I appreciate you protecting me from myself. I tell you one thing, though. If he is back and doesn't report himself and his brother hides him, or he comes within 5 yards of any woman in this county, I'll tear him apart with my own bare hands. Joe's voice was quiet. Yeah, I know you will. Arriving back home from picking apples, they were surprised to find the young lady who had had the emergency bathroom run earlier. Her bicycle was leaning against the house. How long she'd been patiently waiting, they didn't know, but it looked as if she was determined to wait no matter how long it took. Okay, I apologize for the odd lighting problem. She had a book open on her lap, and she was doing her homework. When she heard the rattle of the wheelbarrow, she looked up. She closed the book and stuffed it into her book bag. Standing, she opened the screen door as Rocky picked up 2 large bushels of apples. Wow, you're awful strong. Rocky nodded in acknowledgement of her compliment and took the apples into the kitchen. Agnes followed and ushered the girl inside. Does your family know you're here? If not, you might want to call them and let them know. Well, I went home after school and told my mom what happened. I said I wanted to apologize again for making a mess. She said I could come over as long as I didn't make a pest of myself. I can stay a little bit if you don't mind. My name's Sheba, by the way. Rocky finished drying his hands, shook hers. Pleased to meet you. I'm Rocky, and these are Agnes and Mary. Sheba was invited to sit down while the apple peeling commenced. Can I help? Instead, I'm real good at peeling apples. I can get most of the skin off in one go. Agnes handed her a peeler and laid some newspapers out. You and I can peel. Rocky will core and cut them and put them in the pot. We're making applesauce and apple butter. Sheba's eyes closed momentarily. I love applesauce. I put it on my pork chops. I can put it on bacon for breakfast. True to her word, she was an accomplished apple peeler, and except for a few, apples did the complete job in one go. Rocky was hard pressed to keep up, coring the apples and cutting them. He had a pot of water on the stove and was getting the water hot. By the time the apples were ready, the water was hot, and he dumped that large bowls of apple pieces into the water with 2 scoops of sugar and plenty of cinnamon. In the time that the peeling was being accomplished, Sheba had apologized about 5 times and was about to do so again when Agnes held a hand. Sheba, it's nothing. You had an emergency. You even helped clean up the bathroom, so it wasn't like you just came in, made a mess, and skedaddled. Agnes brought over a few sodas and some cookies and put them on the table. Sheba looked around the kitchen in awe at the spotless cleanliness. The smell of cooking apples and the sunlight streaming in and putting a glow on everything it touched. Gosh, it's nice in here. It's like being in somebody's grandma's. She looked at Agnes and blushed. I didn't mean to. I mean, you're not anywhere near grandma age. It's just, the place feels like grandma's. Agnes chuckled. I know what you mean. Kind of like it's been here forever and will still be around forevermore. Sheba nodded enthusiastically. I like that. That sounds like poetry. She turned to look at Rocky. You look really familiar, but I don't know why. I know we see you and Mrs. Agnes whenever we come out, but I swear I've seen you lots of times somewhere else. Rocky pulled open the door and pulled out his badge. Oh, this is what I usually wear while I'm in town. Her face turned red and she almost choked on her soda. Wow, you're Sheriff Stone. You and Deputy Talbot are like really famous. I know the plaques on the wall over at the Historical Society. Rocky laughed and put the badge away. Well, I'm on vacation, so now it's just Rocky. She finished up her soda and got ready to leave. Agnes checked the apples. They were ready for canning. Well, if you want to stay a little bit, we'll give you some homemade applesauce to take with you. She jumped out of her chair. Can I borrow your phone, please? Agnes led her to a rotary phone that had an earpiece and a separate mouthpiece. Sheba had to stand on a chair to use it properly. She came back into the kitchen glowing. Mom said, I can stay for the applesauce, and please, can I have 2 since Mom and my brother love it too? Agnes was sifting the lids and caps and adding 2 more. I think we can spare a couple more, don't you, Rocky? Rocky nodded and pulled a jar after jar out of the boiling water. The jars were just starting to be filled when placed inside of a huge pressure cooker for the canning when Rocky suddenly stopped Agnes mid-fill. You know, she'll be doing, gotta have a drink. She'll be doing this when the semester hits. Wouldn't hurt to let her get a little practice in. Agnes agreed, and Sheba put on an apron. Mary in the office began to cry, so Rocky left to take care of her. Agnes proceeded to prepare the bottle and brought it into him. The sound of a baby feeding, gentle rocking, and Rocky's tender voice singing to his daughter were softly heard, muffled by the closed office door. Agnes proceeded to teach the finer points of canning applesauce to Sheba, who was continually distracted by the thought of the tough, stern sheriff crooning lullabies and feeding an infant. Sheriff Stone isn't anything like I thought he'd be. I mean, he's just like a real dad. Well, he is a real dad. In fact, he's a lot like my own father. They both look on the whole town as if they're part of the family. From upstairs, Tucker came down the stairs looking around. Hearing sounds in the kitchen, he saw someone new lift her leg on the chair, then scratched at the back door. Sheba, would you let Tucker out? He has to go take a walk. She jumped down and opened the door for Tucker. Together, they finished putting the cans into the cooker and set the timer. Sheba finished her homework with a sandwich and another soda to sustain her. Agnes joined Rocky in the office, and Tucker eventually asked to come back inside. Rocky emerged with Mary on his shoulder, patting her back. Agnes tucked a towel under Mary and over Rocky's back, just as the timer for the canner dinged. Now the important thing was to let the pressure release on its own. It takes a while, but if you try and hurry it along by pulling the weight off, everything is ruined. I think we should be ready to pull them in about 10 minutes or so. For Sheba, the 10 minutes lasted an hour. Slight diversion was granted when Mary finally belched, sending milk down Rocky's back. Sheba folded up the towel and helped wipe off Mary's face. She's pretty, just like her mama. Agnes blushed and Rocky agreed. The canning completed, the jars were lined up and they waited for them to pop. The first two that popped were wrapped up in a dish towel and placed in Sheba's book bag. You want Rocky to give you a ride in the truck? It's getting dark and I didn't see a light on your bike. Sheba was torn. A ride in the truck with a sheriff would be a real treat, but she didn't want to be a nuisance. Rocky had her call her mom, let her know he'd be driving her home, and describe the truck she'd be on the lookout for. Returning later, he said Sheba had thoroughly enjoyed her stay and thanked them both over and over. All right, the next chapter is Brothers, so we'll do that one. And that's it for right now. So I appreciate you being here. We're going to call it quits a little bit early. It didn't take very long to do this one. Apologize for the flashing light. I'll get that fixed if I can. It's on a dimmer switch, so I don't know what I can do about it. So anyways, that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I apologize for my voice. It's getting worse all the time, but I'll do this as long as I can. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. Be good and be good to yourself. Bye.